Those are extremely moving visuals. This is the India development debate and the dreaded terror attack on the CRPF convoy in Pulwama of Jammu and Kashmir that has claimed the life of 40 brave soldiers has completely shaken up the country, pointing to glaring loopholes at India's intelligence apparatus. The worst part, though, is the return of a Fedayeen-style attack in the valley that has been the bane for the country's security establishment. Pakistan-based terror outfit Jaish-e-Mohammed, led by Maulana Masood Azhar, who was freed during Kandahar hijack, has now claimed responsibility for the suicide attack. While opposition parties have backed the government in the dire time, they have questioned the government's failure on not being able to prevent the attack. For now, New Delhi has withdrawn the most favored nation status according to Pakistan, with steps already being taken to isolate Islamabad diplomatically. Vowing to avenge the dastardly attack, the government has given the armed forces full freedom to strike back at the perpetrators. Of course, there are many questions that remain about the fact that attacks show India's intelligence agencies have hardly learned any lessons from the colossal failures on its part in preempting 26/11 in Mumbai. There are also question marks over the efficacy of India's surgical strike post Uri, which was thought to act as a deterrent against future misadventures by Pakistan-based terror groups. What led to Pulwama attack, its consequences, what lessons should be learned, and what are the possible steps that need to be taken, and are we really staring at a full-blown military confrontation, and what will the cost of that be? Many questions right here on the India development debate. We've got an expert panel right here. Brahma, Chellaney, strategic affairs expert, joins us. Colonel Ajay Shukla, senior journalist and strategic affairs expert also. Lieutenant General Kamal Davar, former chief of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Kamal Sibbal, former diplomat and former foreign secretary. And Maruf Raza, consultant and strategic affairs expert. So thank you very, very much, sir, all of you, for being with us. And Kamal Sibbal, if I may begin with you, after surgical strike, it was assumed that Pakistan's deep state, which is really the military, the ISI and the terror organizations, will think twice before launching an attack. It seems the theory has been busted and has completely failed after the Pulwama attack. Do you agree?
Well, I don't think that we should have considered these surgical strikes a step that would end terrorism against India. That was a warning to the Pakistani establishment that there would be severe and unpredictable reaction from the Indian side. But I think Pakistan has had a great deal of experience of similar action even by the Americans against them, and they have not changed their ways. So simply a surgical strike by us is not going to persuade them to dismantle the whole apparatus of terrorism that they have fostered and nurtured over the years, with the clear political aim of destabilizing Afghanistan and India in Jammu and Kashmir, and using their proxies in order to advance their interests as they define them. So I think we should, while the surgical strikes did send a message, but I think the Prime Minister himself said that Pakistan's mindset is not going to change simply because of one surgical strike.
No, hold that thought, and you may be right that perhaps surgical strikes was never going to be enough to teach a lesson. But Brahma, Chellaney, let's talk about the way forward. Are all options bad options from here on, right now? Or do you believe there is scope for quick responses which can perhaps have lasting impact?
There are options short of war. War is not an option, and certainly the Pakistani state, which is currently reeling from a serious financial crisis, is in no position to wage war. But even for India, waging a full-fledged military war is not a good option. But India has a number of options in the peaceful domain. I think the fundamental problem that India is facing today, the problem that has come back to haunt India, is India's failure to treat Pakistan as a terrorist state in Indian policy. India wants the US to declare Pakistan as a state sponsor of terrorism, but shies away from declaring Pakistan as a state sponsor of terrorism. But even if India does not wish to declare Pakistan openly as a state sponsor of terrorism, India has a number of diplomatic, economic, riparian, and other options to squeeze Pakistan to pressure Pakistan and to isolate Pakistan. For example, there is no reason for India to maintain full diplomatic relations at the level of High Commissioner with a terrorist state. This allows Pakistan to maintain a bloated mission in New Delhi, which is infested with ISI spies. The least that India can do is to downgrade the diplomatic relationship with Pakistan. India has now today called back its envoy from Islamabad for consultations. I don't know whether this is a prelude to kicking out the Pakistan High Commissioner from New Delhi.
Okay. Give me a minute, and I wanted to actually take the tempers and the emotions running high argument forward. But Lieutenant General Davar, the obvious follow-up from this question really has to be that while yes, we have been, and I'll come to MFN and withdrawing our own envoy from Islamabad, but do you agree that perhaps curtailing or bringing down and downgrading our diplomatic relations significantly, perhaps asking the Pakistan envoy to leave, is the obvious next thing that we will perhaps see happen?
India has a multiplicity of options, not only diplomatic, military, economic. All we have to do is synergize these options and get on with the job. The trouble is India is too laid back when it comes to, dealing with Pakistan. And when you talk about diplomatic options, why cannot India raise its voice and isolate Pakistan internationally? And as Brahma Chellaney also mentioned, I totally agree with him that one of the diplomatic options is that we
Okay, there seems to be a problem and a glitch with his line. Please, let's get that connected very soon. But Ajay Shukla, I'll come to you. Tempers and emotions are obviously running high. From we shall isolate Pakistan diplomatically to Pak sponsors terrorism to our unity will make us win. We will not let the sacrifices of our Jawans go in vain. I mean, tempers are running high and so are emotions. The response has obviously been on predictable lines, but realistically put, what can be done right now? I mean, let's put our finger to it, from diplomatic to military to economic means. What looks perhaps most plausible at this stage?
Well, let's also keep in mind the fact that the government, after the CCS meeting today, the Foreign Office issued a statement saying that Pakistan has been asked to take verifiable action against the Jaish-e-Mohammed and to ensure that it's brought, reined in and brought under control. So the back door, as it were, to a non-kinetic or a non-sanction-based settlement has always been kept open. And I would not entirely rule out Pakistan trying to make some moves in that direction. But assuming that Pakistan just does what it has always been doing so far, which is to, brush off the thing and make only token gestures, there are a number of options that are available. I don't believe that withdrawing the High Commissioner or withdrawing, embassy staff constitutes a viable option. I don't think Pakistan is deterred in any way by that. And in any case, when we are imposing kinetic sanctions or kinetic strikes on Pakistan, you actually want your ambassador in place, both ambassadors in place, as experienced diplomats who can carry on a simultaneous dialogue. Because you never in international relations shut the door to dialogue or to exchange of knowledge and information, even when you're fighting a war with each other. So that I would not do. But at the same time, I don't believe any options short of kinetic would at this stage cause Pakistan to change course or change behavior. We've seen that even at the kinetic level, when we executed the surgical strikes in 2016, that was simply not enough to impose behavioral change on the Pakistan army. It was tokenism. It was just something that was directed more at a domestic audience than at Pakistan's imposing behavioral change on Pakistan. So I think that there are options to be taken. There are options that are already decided, pre-designated. People are prepared for that. They were probably discussing that this morning in the core group meeting, because even when you pre-prepare kinetic options, they have to be discussed at the time of execution in the political context that is prevailing at that time. And in this particular moment, we have China behaving in a certain way. We have the Afghanistan dialogue and America supporting Pakistan on that. So there is a political context, and all those kinetic options will have to be weighed in that political context. So that process is underway. I wouldn't want to second guess the government on that, but I'm sure that there is considerable thought process on that right now.
No, I kind of agree with you there that there is a lot of context that one has to read in before we start jumping to conclusions. And I think my only request to at least my community will be, let us not fan emotions here. Let's have a sensible dialogue. Let's have a sensible discussion. Let sane voices prevail. But Maruf Raza, I will come to you, and because Ajay Shukla really put his finger on. There are very many options, but there is a context, whether it's the China angle, whether it's the US angle, where the whole Afghanistan, Taliban, and the Pak metric. There have so far been two types of robust responses against Pak-sponsored terror. After 2002, it was Parakram, Operation Parakram, and the other one was, of course, after the Uri attack, the response there. The question really is that at a time like this, when there is so much focus going to be on Kashmir, 30-odd nations have issued a statement and their solidarity and all of that. Pakistan forces are in full alert. What are the options that you see before us? Is this really staring at quote-unquote non-military options?
Well, my view is that you cannot look at the entire issue in a piece-by-piece kind of approach. You have to look at it comprehensively. And the way to look at it comprehensively, and we are all aware that every modality and option has been considered both at the diplomatic and military level. Often we are unable to implement them because there is a certain degree of reluctance at the political level to go that extra mile. Mr. Brahma Chellaney brought out a couple of very relevant points, and one of them is you want the world to declare Pakistan a sponsor of terror. But I haven't heard our Honorable Prime Minister till date call Pakistan a sponsor of terror. His cabinet ministers have, his government has taken the position that terror and talks don't go together. But he said that before he became Prime Minister, but then he began to engage with Pakistan till he was rebuffed with the Pathankot attack following his Lahore visit. So I think we need to have a very clearly defined policy against Pakistan, and Pakistan actually has a good laugh behind our backs, saying that we have the finest of minds in India, but our responses are muddled. The second thing is that I think we have traditionally punched well below our weight when it comes to dealing with Pakistan. We have a number of options right now available to us which we haven't exercised. Let me give you two examples. Why are we continuing to encourage companies to invest and engage in India when they are also doing business with Pakistan? Why can't we pull the stops against them and tell them choose? The second thing is that countries that are supportive of Pakistan right now, as the government goes around trumpeting the fact that they have isolated Pakistan diplomatically, and the IMF is not relenting in giving them the financial bailout. China has bailed them out, Saudi Arabia has bailed them out, UAE has bailed them out. So it's about time we need to take stock of the situation, and the earliest steps I would suggest is at diplomatic level. The Saudi Crown Prince is due to visit India this month, and the Chinese are always looking to do more business with India.
Right.
And then you have to spell out the Riot Act. And the last point and the most important point is that diplomatically, when you talk of keeping relationships going, please remember, we lost very few men compared to the number of people we've lost in Kashmir over the last 3 decades when the Chinese invaded us.
Right.
We hardly or at the minimum level engage with them for a decade between 62 and 71. Why are we so desperate to keep relations with Pakistan going? Okay, what purpose is it serving?
Okay, Maruf, I get your point there, and I also get your anguish and anger, but let me go across to Lieutenant General Davar. And sir, operations across the LOC, and my apologies, we lost that line, but operations across the LOC tend to stay confined there and carry a low risk of escalation. Retaliation across the international border risks conventional escalation. Are we looking at a significant cross-LOC retaliation? Are we really looking at the possibilities of what many people are now fearing and are concerned of some sort of a scaled-up military confrontation? The tempers are running high, the political context is not hidden from anybody, and people are concerned that could retaliation be a lot more than one envisages.
You know, during this time, it is not correct to conjecture, especially when it comes to the military options, military option is concerned. But let me tell you, we have various contingency plans, which I'm not going to share on national television. And if the government makes up its mind, and I think the Prime Minister has very candidly said it very clearly today, that he has given the army or the armed forces whatever they wish to do. So let's leave it at that. This is hard. It's not prudent for me or for anybody to discuss the military option, but there are many contingency plans to deal with a rogue neighbor. And you know, the escalatory ladder, of course, goes up whenever you carry out a kinetic option. So we leave it at that, but don't be too surprised in case we go in for a reasonably solid military option against the Pakistanis.
Okay, fair point indeed. But very quickly, Brahma, Chellaney, there's been a lot of demand, and I think, you know, the expert community out there, or what you're sampling on media or social media, there's a lot of demand of action against the against the JEM. But are we once again trying to have the tiger by its tail? It isn't, after all, JEM, but it's the ISI, and it's perhaps the Pakistan army that needs to be dealt with, and not JEM. I mean, JEM may have done this at the behest of the ISI, so are we again trying to in some way tame the tiger by its tail?
Well, that's a good question, a very relevant one, because it's the ISI and the military establishment in Pakistan that are waging an unconventional war against India, a proxy war by terror, and they're using front organizations like the Lakshar and the Jaish. We don't know for sure whether the Jaish was involved or whether it was the Lakshar, because in the last couple of years, given the publicity that Lashkar got because of its early involvement in a number of strikes in India, the Pakistani military establishment is now promoting the Jaish as its front organization. So we do not know exactly which groups were involved. Certainly this wasn't the work of one gentleman. A number of people were involved in this attack. Those that trained, those that provided the explosives, those that created the infrastructure for the attack. So there's a group of people that were involved in this attack, and certainly these people got training both in explosives and in other areas from elements across the border. Whichever group was involved, the fact is, as you point out, it's the Pakistani military establishment that is behind this attack. And let's not forget that after every attack, we hear the same stuff from the Indian political leadership, whether it's the present government or the previous government or the government before that. We will give a befitting reply to this attack. This has become the favorite phrase of the Indian political class. Unfortunately, in India, we do not match our words with actions. That undermines India's credibility and also undermines India's deterrent posture. And the second mistake we make is that we focus only on the full-fledged conventional deterrence angle or the nuclear deterrence angle. But we're not seeking to forge sub-conventional deterrence. In other words, we're allowing Pakistan an open field to wage an unconventional war against India without India seeking to impose costs on Pakistan to deter its sub-conventional warfare against India. So we have to create sub-conventional deterrence to prevent Pakistan from continuing to wage its war of 1,000 cuts against India.
give me a minute, and I want to come back to the sub-conventional in just a bit. But Kanwal Sibal, one of the things that has been done is that the most favored nation status has been revoked. The Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan has been recalled. Prima facie, how important are these measures, and will this yield any significant impact?
No, not at all, because so far as the MFN status is concerned, look at the volume of our trade with Pakistan. About $2.42 billion is nothing much at all. And then the Pakistanis have been complaining that, yes, you have given us MFN status, but there are these non-tariff barriers which do not permit easy flow of Pakistani goods into India. So the impact on Pakistan of the revocation of the MFN status would be very little. But it is a symbolic step. It is a symbolic step. Insofar as recalling the ambassador is concerned, this is a clear political signal to Pakistan that we are deeply concerned about what has happened, and this is traditional diplomatic communication, where if you want to express your unhappiness with a foreign government, you recall your ambassador, as recently the French government has done by recalling their ambassador to Italy because the Italian government made some unfriendly noises. But whether this will be a precursor to breakdown of diplomatic relations, etc., I don't know. But there is one thing I'd like to say. We haven't found an adequate answer for all these years to Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism against us. The one instrument that we have in our hand, to which Pakistan will not have a response, just as we don't have a response to their sponsorship of terrorism, that is the Indus Waters Treaty. And the time has come to directly link Pakistan's conduct on terrorism and curbs on Hafiz Saeed, not merely curbs, trial of those responsible for the Mumbai massacre, doing something in terms of incarcerating Hafiz Saeed and Jaish-e-Mohammed to the Indus Waters Treaty. And therefore, as a first step, we should suspend the treaty until such time as we get clear, credible signals from Pakistan that they are willing to address the issue of terrorism, and they will have no answer to this. They will have no answer to this with regard to some arguments that, look, this is a long-standing treaty and it cannot be repudiated. But look at what the Americans have done. They walked out of the ABM treaty. They walked out of the INF treaty. They walked out of the climate change accord. They walked out of the accord with Iran. So look at the Chinese, what they've done in South China Sea. They've absolutely dismissed and ridiculed the decision against them of the International Tribunal under the law of the sea. So what is it that is holding us back? Where Pakistan uses terrorism in this blatant fashion against us. For years they've been bleeding us, and we continue to honor this treaty as if we have a greater stake in it than even the Pakistanis have.
Colonel Ajay Shukla, I want you to come to, respond on this point. How decisive a step will that be? Revoking or suspending the Indus Water Treaty. It's a treaty that the World Bank brokered. It helps Pakistan and India share water from the 5 rivers. How significant a measure is that going to be? Is that going to hurt where it really matters? Are efforts like these going to go a long way more than MFN, because MFN is just 0.35% of our trade altogether?
So Priya, do you really think that we've not thought about this option before? This option has been considered and comprehensively ruled out for the simple reason that we are the lower riparian in as many places as we are the upper riparian. All the rivers that flow into Pakistan, or at least many of them, originate in Tibet. And if you start cutting off the flow of water to Pakistan, that leaves the door open and leaves you exposed to China cutting off the flow of water to you through rivers like the Brahmaputra, the Indus, the Satluj, and so on. So this is a favorite hobby horse of many Indian strategists, but it's not. It's a complete non-starter. It's opening the doors to many consequences where you will find yourself at the receiving end, and China will be laughing all the way to the bank, as it were. But I really think that our responses have to be framed in terms of what we put together in terms of our security responses within the country. You know, we've heard across television channels in incident after incident that the country has joined hands in bidding farewell to our brave martyrs. The country should not join hands in bidding farewell to the brave martyrs. It needs to join hands in providing resources to the soldiers who are still serving at this point in time, so that they don't become brave martyrs. That is what the country has miserably failed in. It has failed in putting forward and executing appropriate security responses, putting the weapons in place, the equipment in place, the SOPs in place, and that is why we still expose ourselves to these attacks. We expose ourselves to incidents where we find ourselves in a position where we want to impose punishment on Pakistan, but we just can't seem to find the right punishment to impose. So let's focus on what we can really do internally, how we can equip our forces, what they need to be equipped for in tackling terrorism in places like Jammu and Kashmir. That would be a more sensible way to do it.
No, I don't disagree with you at all on that, and there's a segment of the show where I am going to focus on, you know, intelligence failure, what is it that we need to do, how better equipped can they be, why was such a big convoy on the road, and things like that in just a minute from now. But I also want to put forward a very important question, and Maruf Raza, coming to you. Where did we fail? Were we misled by the new government in Pakistan into believing that Imran Khan really meant what he said? And I think one of the questions that is now being raised is that if he really did mean to walk the talk, he just has to hand Masood Azhar to India. But is that going to be possible? Was India a little sanguine about the new government, and were we misled to believe that Imran Khan was very much his own man?
Well, Supriya, you've got to be an absolute novice at looking at India-Pakistan relations to believe that every Prime Minister that comes in will finally alter the course of relations and alter Pakistan's obsession of using terror as an extension of foreign policy. Pakistani Prime Ministers, when they step out of line with the establishment which really runs their policy on India, Afghanistan, nuclear weapons, China and the US, and if they challenge that, at best, like Nawaz Sharif, they go to jail. At worst, they go to the gallows like Bhutto. So please understand, whatever Imran Khan's intentions, whatever his friends in India say, he has his limitations. His brief has been spelt out to him by his masters who propped him up out there, and that is the generals in Rawalpindi. The second thing is that we have gone wrong because repeatedly we have been wedded to various pillars in our approach to Pakistan, whether it is assuming that eventually we will be good neighbors, or whether it is assuming that if you keep making noises, Pakistan will alter course. This is a very thought-through action that was initiated in General Zia's time. It is Pakistan's longest-running terror campaign, which is called Op-Topak. It has been articulated to make up for Pakistan's failure to effectively implement Part 1 of the 65 operations, which is Operation Gibraltar. Now let me sort of compliment Colonel Shukla for one or two good points that he has raised. One is about the Indus Waters Treaty. Yes, a lot of thought has gone into it, but the fact of the matter is that before you decide to pull off the Indus Waters Treaty and call off the arrangement, and we can live with the implications of that as far as the World Bank is concerned, which was the third party to the Treaty of 1960. The fact is, we haven't made enough arrangements to use the water that is given to us under the treaty effectively. Even that much of it flows into Pakistan. So I think we need to get our water management sorted out before we look at blocking the routes. Mr. Brahma Chellaney is an expert on that, has written a book on that. I think he can educate us a bit better. But I think the most important point is that, we talk of equipping our armed forces, we talk of intelligence failures, etc. Today's conflict in Kashmir is the war zone of today. It is no different from Afghanistan or Syria or wherever. You're not going to have tanks rolling across the plains. You're going to have irregular conflicts like the one, or you call it low-intensity conflicts, like the one you're seeing in Kashmir. And one of the forces that has traditionally been used as cannon fodder by our insensitive political leadership and ill-informed bureaucracy is the CRPF. You need to train, equip, and give them better leadership before you can get your act together. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, they will only turn the course when the military in Pakistan feels the pain. And one of the ways to get the military in Pakistan to feel the pain is to tell America to stop giving visas to generals and their families and education scholarships and medical treatment and all the benefits they enjoy of the relationship of America, which even now, there are many American diplomats who swear by.
Maruf, give me a minute. Yes, Maru, give me a minute. I will come back to you in just a minute. But Brahma, Chellaney, I do want to address the elephant in the room that not many people are talking about, and that is China. We can't have this discussion. We can't talk about the Pakistan-sponsored terror and all of that without looking at what a big bone of contention China poses. And my question really is, what and how should our engagement with China be at this stage? I mean, China, for all practical purposes, has stalled our efforts to declare Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. They've stalled that at the UNSC. They're pumping in money into Pakistan, an almost bankrupt state. $65 billion is the kind of money that China is pumping into the infrastructure. What should the terms of engagement be there, and what should the modus operandi be there? We can't talk about Pakistan without talking about China in the same breath today.
Precisely. By shielding Pakistan's export of terrorism, China is emboldening Pakistan's adoption of terrorism as an instrument of policy. In fact, one cannot ignore China's culpability in the massacre of 40 Indian paramilitary soldiers. We can't just ignore the fact that China indirectly has aided this massacre. In fact, what Pakistan is doing by waging asymmetric warfare against India is actually taking a leaf out of the Chinese playbook against India. It was China that first trained and armed the Naga and Mizo guerrillas. The first guerrilla movements in India were aided and abetted by China. And even today, if you look at the Ulfa chief, where is he? He's ensconced in Yunnan, along the border of China with Myanmar. And not just the Ulfa chief, several other insurgent leaders from India's northeast are in link with China. In other words, while Pakistan keeps India busy on the western side through its proxy war, China uses militants to weigh down India on its eastern flank. And I think China's role is critical. But if I could make one point on the Indus Waters Treaty. Kamal Sibal spoke about suspending the Indus Waters Treaty. He did not talk about cutting off flow. Nobody in his right sense has ever suggested cutting off water flow to Pakistan, which is physically not possible. Suspension of a treaty is possible and also allowed under international law. For example, Article 62 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties says that when the fundamental circumstances change, one party can either suspend or withdraw from a treaty, even if the treaty is of indefinite duration. The fact is that this treaty was signed in 1960 when there was no Pakistani campaign of terror against India. So the circumstances have fundamentally changed. And even if we do not wish to suspend that treaty, merely keeping the position of the Indus Commissioner in India vacant will make the implementation of the treaty impossible. So we don't even have to suspend the treaty. Just keep the position of the Indus Commissioner in India vacant. That will send a very powerful message to Pakistan. As far as China is concerned, China does not believe in any water-sharing treaty with any country, does not have a single water-sharing treaty with any neighbor, even though 12 countries are located downstream to China. In contrast, the Indus Water Treaty represents the world's most generous water sharing treaty, under which India has reserved more than 80% of the six-river Indus system's waters for its adversary, Pakistan. This treaty is unparalleled in world history, both in terms of the total quantum of water left for the downstream country, as well as in terms of the sharing ratio, which is 80.52 for Pakistan and the remaining 19.48 for India. This is a tool of leverage in India's hand.
Right.
And we have diplomatic options, we have riparian options, we have economic options. We need to use all these non-military options and not just think of the military options. The military options can only be exercised when the enemy is not expecting an Indian strike. You don't strike the enemy when the enemy is on alert.
Oh yes. You don't. No, absolutely. They are on alert. They must have evacuated those training camps and all of that. That's a no-brainer, absolutely. But before I take a quick breather, and I will come back to you, Lieutenant General Dawar, in a minute after this break, but a quick question to Ajay Shukla. And, you know, in fact, let me just take a quick question to Kamal Sibbal and then come back. And Mr. Sibbal, India has been trying to woo some of the Middle Eastern countries, whether it's Saudi Arabia or the Abu Dhabi or the UAE and all of those countries. Can they be used to exert pressure on Pakistan at this stage, because they're also in dialogue with Pakistan? Do you believe that's an option that we could be using? Mr. Sibbal?
Well, you know, there is a delicate aspect to it, because Pakistan relations with these countries are long-standing. And there is the Islamic bond. There are also Pakistani boots on the ground. The Pakistani former chief is head of the counter-terrorism kind of body that Saudi Arabia has set up. So one should not expect too much from these countries, and it may not be very desirable to link our developing ties with them, which are very positive, with gestures by them or policies by them in order to pressure Pakistan. We should leave it to them to judge on the basis of their own interests and of the interests of Pakistan, whether Pakistan should continue to go down this road, or should change its whole approach to the issue of terrorism and violent extremism. So we should leave it to them. But there's one more factor which goes beyond these states. It's the United States of America. Now, they are engaged in this dialogue with the Taliban with the support of Pakistan. Now, while they have strongly supported us on this latest Pulwama incident, now how they are going to balance pressure on Pakistan on the issue of terrorism and at the same time obtain Pakistani cooperation in dealing with the Taliban, which is a priority for them because President Trump has decided to walk away from Afghanistan. So the country that could put real pressure on Pakistan at this point in time, the manner in which they have put pressure on Iran, is the United States of America. But they are hampered by this Afghanistan imbroglio in terms of actually being able to do in action on the ground on the issue of terrorism what we would like them to do, and what maybe in theory they would like to do but are unable to do.
Fine indeed, but you know what, I have to take a really quick breather. We will come back and discuss the intelligence failure, the equipment, and how well equipped the security forces have to be in a moment from now. So gentlemen, please stay with us. I'm back in just a moment right here on the India Development Debate. We're really putting the spotlight on Pulwama, the lessons that have still not been learned and must be learned right now. Welcome back to the India Development Debate, and we're discussing the very, very important Pulwama terror strike, what this means and the way forward. Lieutenant General Dawar, one of the questions that I think a lot of people at least are asking at this stage is the massive gaps of information sharing among military intelligence, the RAW, IB, state police, paramilitary in India, because it's very baffling that whenever there is a terror attack, we in the same breath also hear that there was intelligence just 2 days back and that failed. I mean, 350 kg ID-laden SUV rams into a convoy of 80 vehicles carrying 2,500 paramilitary forces. You know, the intelligence was there, and yet we could not decisively act on it. Why that failure time and again?
No, you have a point there that there has been an intelligence failure, but I must also in the same breath say that whenever there's any catastrophic incident, the first casualty is intelligence. Everybody, you know, lands on to there is intelligence failure. It may be a systemic failure. It may be a failure because of any other reason. In this case, there is an intelligence failure. Also, perhaps some procedural failures, or you know, the road opening party drills were not done adequately as they should have. And you know, one of the things which happened was, as we all know, the last 7-8 days there was a total roadblock on the highway, and I presume people from Jammu would be wanting to, you know, let the traffic congestion, whether it was military vehicles, civil vehicles, to be over with. But you know, you mentioned about intelligence sharing. I'm sorry, I would have agreed with you if you had asked me this question 10 years back or 15 years back. I can tell you that much, that there is a fair amount of coordination, and there is no one-upmanship in areas like Jammu and Kashmir or the Northeast and things like that. All of us do share intelligence, actionable, hard intelligence with each other. Of course, we are humans also. We are not perfect by any stretch of imagination. But in this case, there has been an intelligence failure, as you also pointed out. How have hundreds of kgs come across the international border or the line of the line of control, and they've been assembled into, you know, this so-called very highly lethal bomb or IED blast which took place. I totally agree there. There has been an intelligence failure. We must accept it. We must button up and further improve our drills for road opening parties, because you have to be one or two steps ahead of the terrorist. The terrorist's only sole job is to create problems, but we also have to put our heads together and ensure that a thing like this doesn't happen.
Yeah, fair point. But I wish intelligence that's shared is acted upon so that we can avert crises like this. But Colonel Shukla, you've been highly critical of the National Security Advisor, Mr. Doval, and I think one of the things that one is interested in asking you at this point in time is that, and especially after the Pathankot attack and how it was handled, what, according to you, were the lapses that led to such a big attack to take place? And the sad part is that after every lapse, the accountability has never been fixed. Will it change with time? We almost seem to be acting from one tragedy, from one terror strike to the other. And, you know, I will further speak about sanitization of the area and all of that, but the reality is that the accountability is all about, you know, majboot jawab denge, khada jawab denge, but it all happens, sadly, after many lives are lost.
Yeah, we all just stagger from one crisis to the other, blustering our way through. And fortunately, you have a public that is not very well educated in strategic matters, so they swallow all this rhetoric, this big talk, and then you just continue with business as usual, and then the next crisis is upon you. I would sort of point out just a few important aspects that I would, if I were in any decision-making position, implement right away. The first thing a soldier needs in Jammu and Kashmir, or in any counterinsurgency area for that matter, is good personal kit. Last year, the government made this big highfalutin announcement that we've signed a contract for 186,000 bulletproof jackets, and we've done what no government before us could do, and so on. Let me tell you, Supriya, now 10 months have gone past, 11 months going on. Not one of those bulletproof jackets has reached a soldier as yet. It's all been in the realm of talk. Delivery is very low. So bulletproof jackets, helmets, personal kit, personal communication kit, when all these convoys move, you know, if you look at an American convoy moving in Iraq or in Afghanistan, they carry jammers that prevent IEDs from going off. The IED detection itself, these jammers of course are completely not there with Indian convoys. The detection of IEDs is still done by those old style metal detectors. They're still carrying sniffer dogs, those poor road opening patrols. Methods are still very primitive. So we haven't really geared over to the methods of operation and intelligence gathering that needs to be done for internal security operations. The Jammu and Kashmir police has become a formidable intelligence provision force, let me tell you. In most times, they figure out what is happening, they bring that intelligence to the notice, and an attack is forewarned. But let's remember, you have to be lucky every single day of the week. The terrorist has to get lucky just once. And that's exactly what happens in every sort of case. So you've just got to improve your responses, you've got to improve your equipment, you've got to improve your luck, if that such a thing is possible, and only then can you survive in a counterinsurgency environment. You can't survive by bluster and big talk alone.
No, I agree with you that you've got to be lucky every single day of the week, and the terrorist has to get lucky once, and look at where that lands us. But Maruf, one of the questions that I want to understand from you is, I mean, I understand the logistical and the security need for moving in a convoy, but what about sanitizing the area? I mean, we're really looking at an SUV that suddenly rams into a convoy. This is obviously a big human intelligence failure besides many other things. But some of the issues that have been spoken about, whether it's jammers or personal kits or helmets, should actually be business as usual. These things should be with our security forces. They should be with security agencies. But what about regular security audits, regular sanitization of the area where a convoy passes through? Are we really looking, are we sticking by those rules also?
Well, you know, you've had some very detailed inputs by General Dawar and Colonel Shukla, and both of them have made some very informed pitches. I just want to take it a bit further. See, the first thing is, in my mind, you can have regular intelligence inputs, and I'm sure these are being provided, but there is a job that has to be done at the highest level of putting those inputs together and trying to get the assessment right. Let me give you one example of J&K. This question whether there was 50, 100 or 300 kilograms of explosives will be resolved only after the NIA finally gives its verdict. My suspicion is it is not that large an amount. It's probably in the range of about 100 kgs plus minus. Even then, to assemble that kind of explosive lot, it doesn't come out of an airdrop. It has come in bits and pieces, and indications were there in the last 1 year, at least in the last 6 months. Many caches of arms have been unearthed and discovered, and many of them had a lot of explosives in them, and that was only what we got to know. So quite clearly this was being piled up. There was also indication in the air of messages that the Pakistanis wanted to get the initiative back in terms of trying to tell their followers in Kashmir that all is not lost, particularly after the success of the army of Operation All Out, and therefore they wanted to do something spectacular and big. They were expecting it between 8th and 10th of February, around the time which is the death anniversary of Afzal Guru, but also because there was a revenge element involved, because Masood Azhar's 2 nephews had been eliminated recently. Now those pieces had to be cobbled together. Having done that, and I'm sure there was a certain degree of alert, how did that vehicle come into the convoy? The CRPF's explanation is it came in from a side road which traffic has been allowed due to political pressure, where we don't keep the convoy route completely sanitized of civilian traffic anymore, as was done in the initial years of the insurgency. So at some stage, this vehicle popped out of somewhere in one of the side roads, got into the main convoy route and hit a vehicle. So quite clearly, Colonel Shukla's point is right. I made that yesterday also. We have to be lucky every time. They have to be lucky once. But I think the bigger question is really about why the CRPF comes at the receiving end more often than other organizations. And I sincerely actually attribute this also not because of this convoy incident, but if we really need to do stock taking, We need to understand that you fight the insurgent or a terrorist like a terrorist. You need to provide the kind of leadership to these organizations at the highest level of not just IPS officers who have been very bright in their careers in other states as DGs or whatever, but you need to have people who have experience on the ground. Carry out a study. You will not find a single senior officer in any of the paramilitary forces who has probably had previous experience in that organization. He's there for 9, 10, 11, 12 months, filling the gap before he retires because he wants to go home as a DG. And in the bargain, the force is led by people who really don't understand the nature of counterinsurgency warfare.
No, I understand. And I think that's a very valid point that you're putting to the table, just like the rest of the valid discussion that we've had. But I've got to close this. And Kanwal Sibal, a quick word to you. Do you fear the government action at this stage risks being taken under acute public pressure? You know, the whole debate about Josh versus the Hosh arguments being made, because violence seldom ends a vicious cycle. It perhaps at best perpetuates it.
Well, a couple of things. One is that the government has to be responsive to public opinion. This is not a small incident. This is the biggest terror attack that has taken place in Jammu and Kashmir in terms of loss of lives of the armed personnel. So government has to make sure that the public opinion is not alienated. Secondly, the feelings and sentiments in the armed forces themselves. When you have such heavy casualties, there should not be a feeling in the armed forces that the civilian government is focusing too much on diplomacy and soft options, when actually there is need for tough options. Thirdly, when I think from experience that when people sit down at that highest level to look at the options, they look at it very cold-bloodedly, very rationally, looking at all pros and cons, and nothing is done which is precipitate and which is not properly thought out. In fact, this is the reason why all these years, despite Mumbai and everything else, Government of India has never taken really strong action, because the consequences of taking strong action because of anger and frustration can actually lead to escalation and take you into territory where you may not want to go. That's why I'll come back to what I said. We must suspend the Indus Waters Treaty. That is a very powerful weapon we have in our hands, and Pakistan will have no answer to that.
All right. That has been debated upon as well on the show, but thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us and really putting things in perspective. I think it is tragic to see a lot of noise being created and a narrative being built where everybody from that region is asked to bear the cross of what happened in Pulwama. But the reality is we've got to find solutions, and we've got to find solutions where we isolate the terrorists instead of blaming all for manic, unforgivable acts of a few. The reality is that at this stage we are anguished, we are deeply hurt, and of course we are very aware of the lives that have been lost. But at the end of the day, we've got to get sane voices to prevail. We've got to show political maturity and take the right answer for a long-term impact. Thank you very much for being with us on this edition of the India Development Debate. We take a breather and we're back with Top 10 at 10.